books, things that we were doing on the work day, Larry, when we were doing sign change outs and painting and sprucing up the place, cleaning panels, changing out ceiling tiles, those sorts of things. It's based on a principle that a person that comes to your church as a first-time attender will make a decision within the first 7 to 11 minutes of whether or not they want to come back a second time. Studies have revealed that that decision is made in the first 7 to 11 minutes. We call it the 7 to 11 principle, and that's why we want to make sure and ensure that people, from the moment they enter into one of our parking lots, that as they come in, they feel welcomed. How many times do you get to make a good first impression? One. That's why this is so important. But it's not just for big events. This building stuff, it needs to happen more than just 1 or 2 work days a year, because when we've done that, it's overload. Some of what we've done on the last work day could have been spread out over a few weekends, and it had been a lot less hectic and a lot more feasible and manageable. Team 3, the Tech Arts team. The Tech Arts team has everything to do with information technology. We're not just talking internet. We are talking about graphic design. Any slides you see, if you're interested in creating PowerPoints or banners or signs or bulletin boards. Bulletin boards is kind of not tech, but it's kind of the same goal as tech. Live streaming, if you'd like to think that you could work in the control booth for the audio stream or the soundboard or lights during special productions. If you are interested in like drama, doing a little skit on stage, or what we do with kids in our Easter deal, or making the production video for this Christmas Eve premiere that we just showed, those are the things that are kind of involved in tech arts, okay? I think I've listed drama, lights, computer graphics, video production, camera, stage productions, special effects. Team 4, worship team. Now, when we say worship team, I know a lot of times we think of the 4 or 5 people in some churches that get up and lead the congregation in singing. They call those worship teams or praise teams, and I'm not talking about that. Worship team is led by Terrell Hankins. The elder over worship is Gail Moore. But it's about arranging worship in a meaningful way. It's about running the cameras if needed. Also, soundboard, sound tech stuff, running it is part of this. The music ministry, the song leading, Chad does this for us. The giving, the communion talks, scripture reading in public assemblies, the preaching if you want to fill in, giving announcements even. All these things are part of what we do in worship. That's the worship team. Team 5 is the care, prayer, and follow-up team. Team 5 has an emphasis to follow up on teams 1 and 2, especially for big events. When teams 1 and 2 are focused during big events to draw people here, make a good first impression, make sure they're welcomed and all that, fill out things, and get them invited to the following Sunday for a preacher's breakfast where we get them here and give them a coffee mug or something like that, talk about the church, show a few videos, give them a tour of the building right before services start. If we can get them here 2 Sundays in a row, our chances of retaining them are much, much greater. This is the focus of Team 5. They're the ones that do preacher's breakfasts. Barbara Regier is the one that kind of gets that together for that, and right now, as it is, David Kersey is the team leader for that one. It is the 7 to 11 welcome committee. It's part of the coming in and making sure we've got like at least 7 different people that'll come up to a first-time attender to introduce themselves, say, we're glad you're here, can I help you with something? It's also the follow-ups as we get people sign up for Bible studies, and as they go through Bible studies and they're baptized. And recently we've had those baptisms. Team 5's responsibility involves getting the new converts engaged in growth lessons. And there are several opportunities. One is a series of lessons that are 7 lessons where the new convert will be in 7 different homes, meaning 7 different families or individuals, and they're studying together in a very interactive way, and it's helping them grow and it's helping them integrate. That's the key. That's all a part of Team 5. I see here in the parentheses 7-Eleven, Welcome Committee, Preacher's Breakfast, Growth Track Host, Tour Guide, Ongoing Follow-Up Bible Studies, Discipleship, and Mentoring. Team 6, that's on the back, is small groups. The small groups team. And here we have called our small groups Connect Groups. We just have finished our first trial of Connect Groups. It probably wasn't our first trial because we did have some before, but it's our first really good trial for that. The Sunday drives was one of those, More Than Bread, the ladies' life lessons, the men's coffee group, and I'm out of them. But we're wanting to have more. We're about to sign up again. I think it's the third Sunday of January, signing up for new groups. And we're going to continue some of these. Sunday drives we're going to continue. So that's how passionate would you feel about serving on that team? Being a leader, being a host, being a co-leader. It's about connecting these new converts, especially, but every church member, but especially new converts, to get plugged in with a smaller group that they get to know, and it has a spiritual component, each one. There's a Bible study or a discussion of Bibles. There's prayer, or there's service, or there's worship involved in this. And this can be free market, interest-based groups. It can be men's groups, women's groups, singles groups, college groups, seniors groups, groups that like playing games, groups that like going on drives, groups that like quilting, and we'll have one of those, I think. That's Team 6. And then the final team is Team 7, Children and Youth Team. Children and Youth Team is all about our youth ministry, all about our nursery, all about kids. There's something monthly from 2nd through 5th grade. There's always something on for older kids, and it's about VBS in the summer, volunteering and assisting for programs and events and road trips, a lot of area wides. Jacob, our youth minister, of course, is the team leader for that one, but he's calling for all people that want to get involved to be involved. I'm going to go back over those just real quick to make sure I've mentioned who the team leaders are. Team 1, I'm a leader of. Team 2 is Paul Regier. Team 3 is Tony Swafford. Team 4, Terrell Hankins. Team 5, David Kersey. Team 6, David Backman. And Team 7, Jacob Sanford. So at this time, I want you to do this tonight. If those of you that have it and have a pen or pencil, put your name and date on it. Please indicate to us which one or two of these teams that you feel like you'd have the most interest in by indicating that on the sheet. Okay, I'm done with that part of our... Are we live, you think? Okay. We're having issues. I noticed yesterday Get Real Cable itself had announced that they were under cyber attack, and they took everybody offline for a little while and redid some equipment and put us all back on. So it might be a part of that as to why we're not getting full speed ahead. Apologize about that. Romans 12. We're going to go into more textual studies for these next couple of Sundays before I get to my next special study, but I'm going to encourage you each time, please get your spiritual gift assessments back in. This is for your benefit and our benefit. And your passions assessment, if you can fill that out tonight and leave it, that'd be greatly appreciated. Romans 12, we're going to begin in verse 9, because we've been dealing with spiritual gifts that are pretty much mentioned, verses 3 through 8. But let's read together verse 9 to the end of the chapter. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. bless, and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, "It is mine to avenge. I will repay," says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Okay. Now that we've read that section, this may be the perfect example of why I have been saying in the past that the first 11 chapters of Romans was more doctrinal, and from chapter 12 to 16 is more practical. Because practical means these are things you and I can easily see we ought to be doing. These are simple things we're asked to do. Now, I say simple, knowing that you're looking at this list thinking, this will be hard. What I mean by simple is, it's simple to understand what he's asking us to do. Its simplicity is in the clarity of the instruction. How many of you have bought something, you brought it home, you opened it up, maybe it was to put something together, you start reading the instructions, and it was hard to make sense of? You know? And of course, we want pictures, right? Give us the pictures. Some of us guys won't even read instructions. We're just looking at pictures. That's why we end up with 3 bolts left over and 2 brackets over here thinking, it's done. You know, what do we do with that? Spare parts, you know? We need to be careful with our instructions, but this is hard to misunderstand what's being asked of us. But it is difficult to actually do it. Easier said than done, but it is easily said. There are instructions in the Bible that's not so easily understandable sometimes. We need a little guidance in it. But there is pretty good, concise instructions here. And I'm going to tell you this. I don't know of another place in Scripture that would compare to verses 9, well, really to the end of the chapter. But if you just look at verses 9 through 13, let's just look at that small portion there, the first part we read. I don't know if there's any other passage, any other paragraph in our Bible that is so full of verbs. You know what I mean? And they're verbs that are action verbs. Some of them are passive, some of them are in the form of a participle, but action is being called on in just a few short verses. Let's just go through that 9 through 13 again, and let's point out the verbs. The first word is a verb. How many of you know love is a verb? Most of us think of love as a feeling or as a result, but love is actually considered a verb. Love is a verb. Hate, that's the next verb. Hate is a verb. Cling, what do you think cling means? You ever had a kid cling to you, kind of helicopter mode, no matter where you're at, they're just on, wouldn't let you have any time for yourself? Yeah, we know that. Mothers tend to experience that a lot. Cling, okay? And then be devoted. That's a verb. Honor. That's a verb. Never be lacking in zeal. Keep your spiritual fervor. Serving the Lord. Now that's a participle. Keeping your spiritual fervor is your act of serving the Lord. Be joyful. patient, faithful, share. Action verb there, share. What's share mean? It's not just a thought, is it? We're not just saying, I wish that you have plenty of blessings in your life. That's just a wish. You know, you can't share at a distance. You can't say to somebody standing in the back, be warm and well fed. Sharing means you go clothe them with a coat and you give them food. That's sharing, right? What did you say again? Doing. It's doing. Practice, which to me means don't just do this once and think I've got it checked off for this week and from now on I don't have to do it till maybe next week it resets or whatever. Practice, and it's practice hospitality, means you're constantly working on this. You're constantly doing this, okay? It's not just a one-time thing. Okay, I've done that, you know. You're not looking for just earning a merit badge here, thinking, okay, I did that, I met all this criteria. This is a constant continuation. It really is true of everything, but practice is definitely a word that means keep doing it and doing it. We think of practice as being something you have to do to get good at something, right? Or it's what doctors do, you know, I hate to think of doctors as always practicing on us. They ought to know what they're doing. I hope they have practiced before they see me, right? But we still call it a practice. But practice makes perfect. That's an old line we hear. But practice, I think, mainly for us is implying that we ought to be hospitable people. Keep that as a practice, okay? And that's just those few verses. That's a lot of verbs. Let's go back over it again. Love must be what? Sincere. When you look at the word sincere in the original language, it refers to the idea that when you went into the marketplace to maybe sell or buy a precious metal, for example, or something that you're thinking is pure porcelain or a pure material of some sort, but maybe what you didn't know is there were defects, and they used wax as filler for the voids. Maybe it didn't come out of the cast the way it should have, out of the mold. The cast has some voids, and it's like Bondo to a car body, right? When you go checking out cars, there's a lot of reasons why you'll see guys walking around the fenders. Of course, today, cars are made of so much other things now. But in the old days, and when you hear a different sound, okay, there's Bondo in that. Not knocking Bondo. We got an auto parts salesman here. He still sells it to you. But we know, okay, something happened here, you know, and maybe you can't see it. Usually I can see it through the paint job and stuff, but if you can't, you can kind of hear it. Well, okay, that filler, in the day of Paul's writing, sometimes this was a practice of, yeah, this is all complete. Well, there might have been some wax filling in there. And the word sincere is the Greek word that means without wax. Did y'all know that? Without wax. In other words, it's pure. What you see is all pure, whatever it's being sold as. So love must be what? Without wax, without filler. In other words, I'll break it down to you as this. Love shouldn't be fake. It should be totally honest to goodness love. Does that make sense? And then it says, hate what is what? Evil. Now let's be careful here, because we can take that and appropriate that to people, and we don't need to hate people. Okay? That could be very easily done, and we need to make sure that we're distinguishing the sin of evil. Go ahead. You got a question or a remark? Okay. Yes, it does. It really does. And, you know, you ought to love other things more than you do evil. But there are people in love with evil. Love it less. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, we shouldn't love it at all. Not just love less, but not love at all. Not loving at all is loving less. we just go from the angle love less means if I just go 2 or 3 degrees less than what I love something else, then that would qualify for biblical hate. So I'm qualifying. Some people would equate that to if I go to, this is a weird way of putting it, and probably not the greatest example, but just accommodate me here for a moment. If I go to church more than I go to the bars, then I'm okay, because I do love church more. It's evident by I'm going to the church more. Well, neither does going to church really guarantee your faithfulness, and just going to church is not enough to indicate you're a Christian, you're where you need to be. Now, you need to be in church, right? But that's not the only measuring stick. But don't equate it to that. And whether or not going to bars, that's the thing that I'm using as an example. And of course, I think that there's good decisions and there's bad decisions. And there might be better decisions and worse decisions. But love less can mean put all into God and none into yourself. And so hate what is evil. Hate what's pulling you away from God. Whatever gets in the way between you and God, hate that. That's the idol principle. It doesn't have to be an image that you're bowing down to. It can be a concept that you bow down to. You could pretty much figure out what your obsessions are by seeing where time and money goes. So that's a good way of helping you separate the two. But yeah, love less, when we're talking about other passages where, well, Jacob I loved and Esau I hated, it's not that God hated Esau the way we use it in our English language. And this is the problem of going from original languages like Hebrew and Greek into the American English that we have. We have the word love, but in Greek there's 4 different words for love. So, yes. Yeah. Yeah, we tend to think it's just a little behind. You're just putting something ahead of it. But here, I think the understanding is, don't just make sure you got things ahead of this. Make sure this is getting out of your life. That's the goal anyway. But I can see where you could take that as, well, that preacher said last week that he hated me, and I could say that just meant that I loved Larry more than you. Okay. And while that might be true, I would not use the word hate today, because I know that in our language, the way we really use hate and the way we use love is up for grabs on interpretation. If I say I love you, well, I think you know what I mean when I say I love you, but sometimes you can just hear the words I love you and we may not know, but what do you mean? How? What do you mean by that? Because we know there's different understandings of love. Good question, good thought to bring that up. So love must be sincere, without wax. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. And we've kind of already illustrated that cling. But cling is like that magneticism. It's that what's attracting you, and you need to cling to what is good. That can only happen if on the inside you desire it. Okay? If you desire it. I can go to church but not be into it. You know what I mean? But if I desire it, even before I get up, and then when I get up, and as I'm going there, and I get there, church is going to be a better experience for me. And I'm talking about church as a worship service, okay? And that's not a good way to define it. But if I'm talking about the assembly of the saints, when I'm looking forward to it, I'm desiring it, I'm anticipating it, it turns out to be better for me than if I just show up saying, well, I did what Mom said to do. I came to church. You know what I mean? There's a big difference there. And not that I'm asking y'all to get into the judgment business and try to figure out this next Sunday who really wants to be here and who doesn't. Don't you think you can kind of tell who does and who doesn't sometimes? Let's be honest. You think you ever look at somebody and think, that dude does not want to be here. Or that lady, or at least maybe I can tell maybe when someone's mind is somewhere else. And and I can tell those who really want to be here. The ones in the middle, I'm saying some I can tell, one or the other. The majority of you, I have no clue. I just have to guess and assume that you want to be here, right? This means, yeah. You're wondering if I can figure out right now that you don't want to be here, aren't you? Fake it till you make it, right? It's still better to be here, but there's this idea behind clinging is you're drawn to it. You think you get a load out of the dryer and things clean together. It's like it's hard to keep them. How many of you ripped some cellophane or some tape and you've opened it up and you've torn a piece off, but it won't come off your finger? You know, it's that static electricity keeping it there. That's clean. Cling to what? What is good. Now, if you cling to what is good, hating the evil kind of is taken care of by default. Do y'all see that? It really isn't a matter of I have to remember to hate what is evil and remember cling to what is good. If you're truly clinging to the good, you really don't have to do a lot of concerted effort to hate evil. Because clinging to good will consume your time and money and resources. Does that make sense? It's going to displace the other one. But he's clarifying it, so hating what is evil will help us come over to things that we should cling to, and clinging to what we desire will help us move away from evil. The two go hand in hand. Honor one another above yourselves. This is not about you. It's about other people in your life that you can encourage. Never be lacking in zeal. Never be lacking in zeal. Now, zeal is an emotion in a way. It's like joy. It's like something you feel like, something you're happy in, and that doesn't always stay steady, does it? A feeling goes up and down all the time. It's an emotion. It can be a roller coaster. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So, I think here, zeal is implying that you are setting the gauge. You've set your heading to be this way, but you may not always be this way, but that's where your heading always is. I don't wake up every morning just in a really good, warm, fuzzy mood, happy all the time disposition. I mean, if you thought that was me, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. That's not always me, is it, honey? I can be a cold, prickly bear sometimes. And you know the expression, well, you got up on the wrong side of the bed. You know what that means. And I don't think that this is stuck on the emotion of zeal. I think this is more of the determination of where is your bearing at? Where's the heading? Because things can blow you off course, but you want to try to get back to that heading, and you always want to know where your bearing is. You need to not lose your sense of where it is you want to go. That's what I think it means, never lacking in zeal. Have zeal more in your life. Have that joy, abundant love, that blessingness that can come through Jesus, and He's the fuel for that. He's the source of that zeal. And it says, but keep your spiritual fervor. What do you think fervor is? Excitement. And I was hoping maybe we could come up with a good way to illustrate that. And I've used this person before to illustrate fervor. And I just got off the phone with him this morning. Mike Napier, you know, when he's here doing missions about Gospel Chariot Ministries, you can tell, can't you, that he has fervor for that work. And as a matter of fact, I could tell Mike's kind of not feeling good with his injury of his arm and stuff. He's going through some other things he didn't divulge into, but I mean, Mike is a person of fervor. He's a good example of that. And you might know of other examples of that. that are just, they're passionate about it. It's almost an obsession with Him. Keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope. Now, this is one that's simply understood and I think can be simply executed. Because when you're a hopeful person, you're usually happy. Be joyful in hope, right? Patient in affliction is completely the opposite. Simply understood, but yeah, right. When you're putting it into practice. Because affliction usually does refer to physical pain and struggle. Something that doesn't feel good physically. Let me ask you a question. Do you think your physical being and how it's going can affect your spiritual and emotional being? Everybody thinking it can? Yeah, it does. It does. It's hard to be full of zeal and fervor when you feel like you've been run over by a Mack truck, or you feel this constant gnawing of pain or problem or worrying thing in your life, the dread. Guilt has the same effect. It can rob you of your joy. I always like John 10:10 because Jesus refers to this idea that He says, the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And although it's not mentioned what is being killed or stolen or destroyed, joy is certainly, I think, implied, because what He says next is, I have come to give you life and to give it to you abundantly. And there's a joy concept in that abundance. Go ahead. Right. And I want to say to you, and this goes well for Jeff. Jeff was telling me how he so much wants to be at church right now. But he knows, the doctor's orders is don't get on that foot. Don't be around, getting around. Stay home. And it's a fit to be tied thing. You can get these walls closing in on you, and cabin fever sets in. And yet, in the midst of that, you identify, I'm not feeling like this, but I know where I actually want to be, even though right now I don't want to be, but I know that's where I need to be. And you've kept that in mind. And I think that's the perfect example of what I mean by having your bearing where you know it needs to be. Because there's kind of this guilt that you're not doing what you know you want to do, and you're being held back by this other thing. But God does understand that, but it's good that you know that. I praise you for that. I think you ought to be affirmed, and Jeff affirmed, and those of us who know sometimes we have those things that are beyond our control. That's the way we put it, right? Or I grew up with the phrase, providentially hindered. Lord, be with those that are here today and those that are providentially hindered. In other words, that wanted to be here but can't be here, but they're excused because you know what's going on in their life. It's just kind of what we say. Okay? Faithful in prayer. What does the word faithful mean? Sometimes we boil it down to, well, do they come to church all the time? They're faithful. If they're not coming to church, they're not faithful. Okay? That's one way we've heard it. That's a very oversimplification of the way to use that word. What did you say now? Constant, okay? What else? True, okay? Committed, okay? Faithful in this context is faithful in prayer. What does that mean? Does it kind of relate to a frequency, you think? does it relate to an intensity? You know? Intense praying. Dear God, hope I have a good day. Thank you for everything. Just, in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, it's not a bad prayer. I'm not trying to say anything bad about anybody's prayer, but that's not as intense as weeping over a situation for a loved one or a family that's just suffered for a loss, or when we're begging for answers for a person whose life is on a thread of hope. Please let there be a heart found, or a liver, or whatever is in need, or please let there be a place where they can find that respirator my friend needs to be on. Those are the things that there's a little more intensity than that little trinket prayer you're doing to check off your list every morning. Now, I hope I'm not being too disrespectful. We all need to be praying, and things are going great. That's good. And not every prayer needs to be of the same intensity, but faithful, I think, can relate to the intensity of that prayer. As Jesus' prayer in the garden was of such that it says his sweat drops were as of blood. That's pretty intense. Right. And this is, in my opinion, and I think it's right, but I'll call it opinion. That is the perfect example and interpretation of pray without ceasing. That's pray without ceasing. I think that's King James. I think in NIV, pray continually. But it is this, faithful in prayer too. And it's when you think the answer God's given is a yes or a no. But you need to leave room for God's answer to be not now. And so don't ever lose the hope. And even if you think it's a no, or if it's a not now, and just having a constant, and Lord, if it's not your will, help us to cope with that. Help us to accept what your will is. Doesn't mean you have to like it, but you're asking God to help you with it. So, all right, we're close to the end, so let me go to share with the Lord's people who are in need. I'll tell you what sharing really does for me. What you're doing is giving of yourself, or giving something. You're transporting something to other people. You're sharing. I love what Mom usually says is, well, it's not mine to give anyway. It all belonged to the Lord to begin with. That's the idea of stewardship. But God's using me to be a steward of this, to pass it on, to channel it to everybody else. And so you might think on the surface, okay, that's person A sharing something good, doing a random act of kindness, or giving something to a person in need to person B. B is the recipient. Guess what? A is the recipient. Sometimes more so than B. And I think that's why why Jesus said it's more blessed to give than to receive. And if you think about it, that's true. I kind of feel like I know this is pride getting in the way, and we shouldn't allow this to happen. But sometimes when somebody gifts me something I know I don't deserve, and it's beyond, I feel bad that you thought I need that, or that I've come to this, that I needed this, and you feel bad about asking, or you feel bad about receiving even if you didn't ask. Sometimes, you don't need to do that. Why is that a gut reaction? That you don't need to pay for this meal. You don't do that. Why do we do that? It's just a lesser. I don't know why, but I don't know why we do that. But here's the thing: we all probably know what it makes us feel when we are able to bless somebody, and that's a great feeling. So here's where I've come to this. When somebody is honoring me with some affirmation, even if it's just a compliment. Oh, it was nothing, or I mean, you don't need to do that, or, it wasn't that big of a deal maybe in your mind. Or if they're giving you something, don't rob them of their blessing of giving it to you. I can't accept that. I'm sorry. Please take this back. I mean, they're going to take that back and think, okay, you've just robbed them of a blessing. So receive and give. But our intention is to give. So share is this idea with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. And I kind of covered that already. These next few verses are probably the next verse is the most difficult one. Bless those who persecute you. Oh. Their time will come. That's true. But that time needs to come not at your hands, but at the Lord's. That's why God says, don't you dare step into my role. This is my job description. I will repay, says the Lord. And that's later on. Give room for God's wrath. And I know as angry and as belligerent as some of you can become, it does not compare at all to the way God can be. I'll just put it that way, okay? I've seen some people full of rage before. I know I've been where people's temper has flared, but nothing compares to God, the wrath of God. That's why the Bible says, behold both the goodness and severity of God, which was back in the previous chapter, verse 22. All right. The other verses are pretty easy. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. I think as human beings, we tend to do that. Live in harmony with one another. It doesn't mean that we're all singing the same note, but we're singing in chord. We're in harmony. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Don't think that you're above those, or they're not worth it to me to be around, or they might affect my reputation if I hang around these people over here or these people over here. Verse 17, do not repay anyone evil for evil, which was very commonplace. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But don't do that, he says. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. I think this has to do with community standards stuff. Don't do what everybody else is doing. That's not what this is saying, because that can lead you wrong. But do what is pretty much understood by everybody, by the general consensus. That's right and that's wrong. Do what the right thing is. I think we'd all believe that killing an innocent person is wrong. That's the general consensus that we need to follow. In this verse 18, I've explained it several times, but if it is possible, meaning that it may not be, as far as it depends on you, you can only do your part, not everybody else's part. Live at peace with everyone. So here's the question. Can you be at peace with everybody in your life? No, because it's not always possible. And you can't make the other person feel the way you'd like for them to feel back. Even though you can do your part, you can only do your part. Who can you change the mood of? Just yourself. The disposition, only yourself. Do not take revenge, my dear friends. Okay, we've already kind of quoted that. Let's look at that last verse. We'll be done. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, I know we had earlier, cling to what is good, hate what is evil. That doesn't mean when you're clean to the good, evil will never approach you. As a matter of fact, let me kind of tell you what my opinion about this is. And I think there's biblical precedent for this. When you cling to what is good, Satan throws more arsenal at you that's evil, and more evil is being presented to you. If you're following what's evil and not clinging to, he doesn't have to throw a lot at you, does he? You've already in his realm. But when you're trying to cling to what is good, Satan thought he could tempt the very Son of God. Don't think you're above him, okay? You can't say Satan can touch this. Well, maybe pride just got into your way of problems right there. Pride is your problem because you think you're above it. Don't think that. You need to overcome evil with good. Don't respond in kind. Well, if you're going to cut me off, I'm going to speed up there and cut you off. Road rage happening, and this trip to Texas. Every time I'm near Dallas, we weren't near Dallas, but anytime we get closer to Dallas, I can sure tell we're not no. And everybody's, there's a lot of. I know that's a generalization, but it's always true for me for some reason. There's just a lot of responses I'm thinking of I could have right now as that person just cut me off, and I'm smiling at my family member. Mom's in the car, my wife's in the car. I can't do what I would do if I was in the car by myself. And you certainly don't do that when you're in the church van, by the way. Folks, thank you for your time. That's our study. Sorry for and Jeff, when you watch this, totally wrong. See how this is going to work on your TV or phone, but hopefully you'll get this eventually. We'll stop there. Happy New Year to everybody. I hope you have a safe, happy New Year. I'll see you, Lord willing, Sunday morning in the new year. Thank you. Bye-bye.